The November rain hammered against the windows of the modest apartment in downtown Chicago as Sarah Mitchell sat at her kitchen table, reviewing the final documents for her dream job. After 3 grueling rounds of interviews at Sterling & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious marketing firms, she had finally received the offer letter. Senior Marketing Director, 6-figure salary, everything she'd worked toward for the past 8 years. Her phone buzzed. Mom calling. "Sarah, honey, I need you to come home this weekend." Patricia Mitchell's voice carried that familiar edge of urgency. "It's important. Rachel needs to talk to you." Sarah's chest tightened at the mention of her twin sister. Rachel had always been the quieter one, the one who struggled to find her path while Sarah climbed the corporate ladder. They'd been close once, inseparable even, but the last few years had created a distance Sarah couldn't quite explain. "Mom, I have orientation on Monday. I really can't." "It's urgent, Sarah, please. For family." The guilt worked, as it always did. Sarah agreed to drive to their hometown of Naperville that Friday evening. She had no way of knowing that this decision would unravel her entire life. When she arrived at the family home, a charming colonial with yellow siding and a wraparound porch, Rachel greeted her at the door. Sarah's breath caught, as it sometimes did, seeing her mirror image. Same auburn hair, same green eyes, same constellation of freckles across their noses. But where Sarah carried herself with confidence, Rachel's shoulders hunched slightly, her smile uncertain. "Hey sis," Rachel said softly. "Thanks for coming." Inside, their mother had prepared dinner. Pot roast, Sarah's favorite. The conversation flowed easily at first, catching up on mundane details. But Sarah noticed the glances exchanged between Rachel and their mother, the way Patricia's fingers drummed nervously against the table. "So," Sarah finally said, setting down her fork, "what's this about?" Rachel looked at their mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Sarah, I've been going through a really rough time. I lost my job at the bookstore, and I'm behind on rent. I might have to move back home." Sarah's heart softened. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I can help." "That's not all," Patricia interrupted. "Rachel has an opportunity, a real chance to turn her life around, but she needs your help." The unease Sarah had felt since arriving crystallized into something sharper. "What kind of help?" Rachel leaned forward, her voice pleading. "Just for a few weeks, Sarah. Maybe a month. You could let me use your credentials, your resume. I have an interview at a company in New York. If I could just say I have your experience, your education?" "Absolutely not." Sarah stood abruptly. "Rachel, that's fraud. It's not fraud if you're twins," Patricia said firmly. "It's just sharing resources. Sarah, you have so much. Rachel has nothing. Is it so wrong for a mother to want both her daughters to succeed?" The argument that followed was heated, painful. Sarah tried to make them understand the ethical implications, the legal ramifications, the betrayal of everything she'd worked for, but Patricia kept circling back to family loyalty, to Sarah's selfishness, to how Rachel had always lived in her shadow. Finally, exhausted and hurt, Sarah left. She drove back to Chicago through the darkness, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She told herself it was over, that she'd stood her ground. She was wrong. The following Monday, Sarah arrived at Sterling & Associates for her first day. The receptionist looked confused when she introduced herself. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell, but we already processed your onboarding last week. You should have your employee badge and laptop." Sarah's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I've been in Chicago all week." The HR director was called. Security footage was reviewed. And there, captured in grainy video, was Sarah, or someone who looked exactly like Sarah, completing orientation, signing documents, meeting the team. The same auburn hair, same professional attire, same confident smile. But it wasn't Sarah. It was Rachel. "I don't understand," the HR director said, looking between Sarah and the footage. "If this isn't you, then who?" Sarah couldn't speak. Her throat had closed, her mind racing through the implications. Rachel hadn't just borrowed her identity for an interview. She'd stolen her job, and their mother had helped her do it. When Sarah finally found her voice, when she tried to explain about her twin sister, the HR director's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Ms. Mitchell, this is a very serious accusation. Identity theft, fraud. These are criminal matters. We'll need to investigate thoroughly. In the meantime, we cannot allow you access to the building or our systems. But this is my job. I earned this position. You can call my references, check my credentials." "We did check your credentials. with the person who completed orientation. I'm sorry, but until we sort this out, you're suspended pending investigation. Sarah walked out of the building in a daze. The Chicago wind cut through her blazer as she stood on the sidewalk, watching professionals hurry past with their coffee cups and purposeful strides. Her phone rang. Rachel. Sarah, please don't be mad. Her sister's voice was small, frightened. I just need this chance. You don't understand what it's like to be the failure, the one who can't get her life together. Mom said you'd understand eventually. She said you'd forgive me. Where are you? Sarah's voice was deadly calm. I can't tell you that. Mom said I should lay low for a while. Just let this blow over. The company thinks I'm you. They'll never know the difference. We're identical, Sarah. We always have been. We are not identical, Sarah said. And this doesn't blow over, Rachel. This is my career, my reputation, my life. Rachel was crying now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't go back now. I've already started. They like me here. They think I'm brilliant. They think you're me. The line went dead. Sarah tried calling her mother. Patricia's response was even more devastating. You need to let this go, Sarah. Rachel needs this more than you do. You're strong. You'll find another job. But Rachel, this might be her only chance. As your mother, I'm asking you to do the right thing for your sister. The right thing? Mom, she committed fraud. She stole my identity. She borrowed it, and only because you have so much and she has so little. Isn't that what family does? Share? Sarah ended the call, her hands shaking. She returned to her apartment and began documenting everything. Every email from Sterling and Associates. Every text from Rachel. The offer letter in her name. She contacted a lawyer, who listened to her story with increasing concern. This is complicated, the attorney said. Identical twins, family involvement, and the company already believes your sister is you. You're going to need substantial proof of your identity and timeline. Do you have anyone who can verify your whereabouts during the orientation? Sarah thought frantically. She'd been alone in her apartment most of that week, preparing for her first day. No witnesses, no alibi. Just her word against video evidence that showed her face, her voice, her mannerisms, all performed by the person who knew her better than anyone else in the world. As evening fell over Chicago, Sarah sat in her darkening apartment, realizing the full scope of what had been taken from her. Not just a job, not just an opportunity. Her twin sister, with their mother's blessing, had stolen her identity, her accomplishments, her very name, and Sarah had no idea how to prove she was herself. 3 days after being turned away from Sterling and Associates, Sarah sat across from Detective Maria Gonzalez at the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah spread her documentation across the scarred desk, birth certificates, employment records, timeline spreadsheets she'd created at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. Ms. Mitchell, I understand this is distressing, Detective Gonzalez said, her dark eyes sympathetic but cautious. But cases involving identical twins are notoriously difficult to prosecute. You're essentially asking us to prove that you are you, and someone who looks exactly like you, sounds exactly like you, isn't you. Sarah's jaw tightened. I have my social security card, my passport, my driver's license, which your sister could easily replicate or claim she's the rightful owner of. Detective Gonzalez leaned back in her chair. The company believes she's you. She completed orientation using your credentials. Do you have anyone who can verify your whereabouts during that week? Anyone who saw you, spoke to you in person? The silence that followed was suffocating. Sarah had been so focused on preparing for her new position that she'd barely left her apartment. Grocery delivery. Online meetings with her previous employer to wrap up projects. No witnesses. No proof. There has to be security footage from my building, Sarah said desperately. My apartment complex has cameras. We'll look into it. But Ms. Mitchell, you need to understand something. Detective Gonzalez's tone softened. Even if we can prove you were in Chicago, that doesn't necessarily prove your sister committed fraud. Sterling and Associates would need to file charges, and right now, they think their new employee is you, until we can convince them otherwise. This is a civil matter more than a criminal one. Sarah left the station feeling more defeated than when she'd arrived. The cold November wind whipped through downtown Chicago as she walked, her mind spinning. She needed to find Rachel. She needed proof. She needed someone to believe her. Her phone rang. An unknown New York number. Hello? Sarah Mitchell? A professional female voice. This is Jennifer Chang from Sterling and Associates HR. We need you to come to our New York office tomorrow for a meeting. It's urgent. Sarah's heart hammered. I'll be there. That evening, she booked a last-minute flight to LaGuardia. The expense would drain her savings, but she had no choice. As the plane lifted off the next morning, Sarah watched Chicago disappear beneath the clouds and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. The Sterling & Associates office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan. Sarah had researched the company obsessively during her interview process, imagining herself walking these halls. Now, as security escorted her to a conference room, she felt like an intruder in her own life. Jennifer Chang entered with 2 others, a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as David Sterling, the company's founder, and another woman, the legal counsel. Their expressions were grave. Ms. Mitchell, David Sterling began, we've conducted an extensive review of the situation. Our new senior marketing director, the woman who completed orientation last week, has been performing exceptionally well. However, some inconsistencies have emerged. Sarah leaned forward. What kind of inconsistencies? Knowledge gaps, Jennifer explained. She claimed to have worked on the Brennan Technologies campaign at her previous firm, which was a major point in her favor during interviews. But when our creative director asked her specific questions about the campaign yesterday, her answers were vague, contradictory even. That's because she wasn't on that campaign, Sarah said, her voice shaking. I was. I can tell you everything about it. The client wanted to rebrand their image to appeal to younger consumers. We developed a 3-phase strategy focusing on social media engagement, influencer partnerships, and experiential marketing events. The tagline was Tech That Moves You. The campaign increased their market share by 18% in 6 months. The room went silent. David Sterling exchanged glances with his legal counsel. The woman in our employ couldn't tell us any of that, he said quietly. Where is she? Sarah demanded. Where's my sister? She called in sick this morning, Jennifer said. We haven't been able to reach her since. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This got out of control. I'm at Mom's. Please come. We need to fix this. Sarah showed them the text. That's my sister. She's admitted it. Can you help me now? The legal counsel spoke for the first time. Ms. Mitchell, if you can prove your identity and work history definitively, we'll cooperate fully with law enforcement. But we need to be certain. We need you to undergo verification. Previous employers, references, detailed interviews about your work experience. Can you do that? Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. I can prove everything. The next 6 hours were grueling. Phone calls to former colleagues who confirmed Sarah's voice, her work style, her specific contributions to projects. Video interviews where she demonstrated intimate knowledge of campaigns Rachel couldn't possibly know. By evening, the truth was undeniable. I owe you an apology, David Sterling said, as the sun set over Manhattan, casting golden light through the conference room windows. This should never have happened. Our verification processes failed, and you've been victimized in an extraordinary way. Will you press charges? Sarah asked. Yes. Identity theft, fraud, misrepresentation. Our legal team will pursue this fully. And Ms. Mitchell, the position is yours. It always was. Relief crashed over Sarah like a wave, but it was tainted with something darker. Rage, betrayal, the knowledge that her own mother had helped orchestrate this nightmare. That night, Sarah flew to Chicago, then drove through the darkness to Naperville. She arrived at her childhood home just after midnight. The lights were on. Rachel's car was in the driveway. Sarah's hands trembled as she parked and walked to the door. Patricia opened it before Sarah could knock. Her mother's face was pale, aged somehow in the week since Sarah had last seen her. Sarah, don't. Sarah pushed past her into the house. Rachel stood in the living room, her eyes red from crying. Seeing her was like looking in a mirror that reflected everything wrong, everything broken. I panicked, Rachel said immediately. When they started asking detailed questions, I panicked. I tried to fake it, but I couldn't. Sarah, I never meant for it to go this far. Mom said it would just be the interview, that you wouldn't find out until later, and by then we could figure something out. You stole my life, Sarah's voice cracked. You walked into my job, pretended to be me, and you both thought I would just accept it. Patricia moved between them. Sarah, you have to understand. Rachel was desperate. She'd tried everything, and nothing worked. You've always been the successful one, the confident one. We thought if she could just get her foot in the door, by destroying my reputation, by committing fraud. Sarah turned to her mother, and the betrayal hit her anew. You're supposed to protect both your daughters, not sacrifice one for the other. How could you do this to me? Because she needed it more, Patricia said, and the simple cruelty of those words hung in the air. Sarah felt something break inside her. The family she thought she knew, the mother she thought loved her unconditionally, it had all been conditional on Sarah being the strong one, the one who didn't need help, the one who could be sacrificed for her weaker sister. The company is pressing charges, Sarah said coldly. Detective Gonzalez is filing a police report. Rachel, you're going to be arrested for identity theft and fraud. Mom, you aided and abetted. You could face charges too. Rachel collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Patricia's face hardened. You'd really do that to your own family? You did this to yourselves. Sarah's voice was steady now, cold with certainty. I gave you every opportunity to make this right. You chose to steal from me instead. Now you face the consequences. She turned to leave, but Rachel's voice stopped her. Sarah, please. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but please, if you press charges, my life is over. A criminal record. Prison time. I'll never recover from this. Sarah looked at her twin, her mirror image, and saw a stranger. You were willing to let my life be over. You were willing to let me be the one with a ruined reputation. No job, no future. Why should I save you now? Because we're sisters, Rachel whispered. Because we're family. The word tasted bitter now. Family. The people who were supposed to love you unconditionally had turned into the ones who hurt you most deeply. I'll think about it, Sarah said finally. But Rachel, you're going back to Sterling and Associates tomorrow morning with me. You're going to confess everything in person. You're going to apologize. And then you're going to disappear from my life. Both of you are. She left without looking back, driving through the empty streets of her hometown for what she knew might be the last time. The betrayal was complete, but at least now she knew the truth. Her identity, her accomplishments, her life, they were hers. No one could take them from her again. But as she drove back to Chicago, Sarah couldn't shake the question that haunted her. How do you recover when the people who were supposed to know you best thought you were replaceable? The morning flight from Chicago to New York felt surreal. Sarah sat in 12B, Rachel in 12C, with an empty seat between them creating a physical barrier that matched the emotional chasm. Rachel stared out the window, her face pale and drawn. She hadn't spoken since they'd left their mother's house at dawn. Sarah pulled out her laptop and began reviewing the documentation she'd compiled overnight. But as she scrolled through her files, something caught her attention, a credit card statement notification she hadn't opened. Her stomach dropped as she clicked it open. Charges in New York, designer clothing stores, expensive restaurants, a hotel room at the Mandarin Oriental. All dated during the week Rachel had been pretending to be her at Sterling and Associates. Over $12,000 in unauthorized purchases. Rachel. Sarah's voice was ice. She turned the laptop screen toward her sister. What is this? Rachel's face crumbled. I needed professional clothes for the job. I needed to look the part. You used my credit card? Sarah's hands trembled with rage. Identity theft wasn't enough. You had to steal my money too? Other passengers were starting to stare. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. I was going to pay you back. Once I got my first paycheck. You weren't going to get a first paycheck. This was never going to work. Sarah pulled up her banking app, her fingers flying across the screen. Another shock. A transfer of $5,000 from her savings account, dated 5 days ago. What else, Rachel? What else did you take? Rachel couldn't meet her eyes. I opened a credit card, in your name. The bank approved me instantly because of your good credit score. I thought I could use it to get started, and then once I was established, Sarah felt like she was drowning. The betrayal kept expanding, getting deeper, more comprehensive. This wasn't just about a job anymore. Rachel had infiltrated every aspect of her financial identity. How much? Sarah demanded. $15,000. Rachel's voice was barely audible. But Sarah, I was going to make it right. Once I was earning real money, you were never going to earn real money as me. Sarah wanted to scream, but she forced herself to stay controlled. You don't have my skills, my experience, my knowledge. The moment anyone asked you to do actual work, this charade would have fallen apart. And meanwhile, you've destroyed my credit, stolen nearly $30,000, and committed federal crimes. Multiple federal crimes. The flight attendant approached, asking them to keep their voices down. Sarah apologized and spent the rest of the flight documenting every fraudulent charge, every unauthorized account. By the time they landed at LaGuardia, She had a comprehensive list that made her nauseous. At Sterling and Associates, Jennifer Chang met them in the lobby. Her eyes widened when she saw two identical women walk in together. "This is Rachel Mitchell," Sarah said without preamble. "My twin sister, the woman who stole my identity and has been impersonating me." The meeting that followed was excruciating. David Sterling, the legal counsel, Jennifer Chang, and the head of security all assembled as Rachel confessed everything. She cried through most of it, explaining how desperate she'd been, how their mother had convinced her it would work, how she'd gotten in over her head. "And the credit cards?" the legal counsel asked. "The banking fraud? That's separate from your company," Sarah interjected. "I'm handling that with the authorities. But I need your company to formally document Rachel's confession, file criminal charges for the identity fraud related to employment, and provide me with all records of her attempted employment here." David Sterling nodded grimly. "Ms. Mitchell, Sarah, will cooperate fully. Rachel, you'll need to surrender any company property immediately. Badge, laptop, anything you were given during orientation." Rachel reached into her bag with shaking hands and placed the items on the conference table. The Sterling and Associates badge showed Sarah's face, Rachel's face, with Sarah's name underneath. It was like looking at an alternate reality where she'd been erased. After Rachel signed multiple legal documents admitting to fraud and identity theft, security escorted her from the building. Sarah watched her twin sister walk away, shoulders hunched in defeat, and felt nothing but hollow exhaustion. "Are you ready to discuss your actual start date?" Jennifer asked gently. Sarah looked around the conference room, at the view of Manhattan's skyline through the windows, at the life she was supposed to be living. "I need a week," she said finally. "I have to fix my credit, close fraudulent accounts, file police reports. My financial identity is a disaster. I can't start a new job while dealing with that." "Take 2 weeks," David Sterling said. "We'll pay you a signing bonus to help with any immediate expenses. What was done to you is unconscionable, and part of it happened because our verification processes failed. We bear some responsibility." After finalizing her start date and signing her employment contract, with extra verification steps to ensure her legal identity was properly documented, Sarah left the building and headed to the nearest Federal Trade Commission office to file formal identity theft reports. The FTC agent who helped her was a middle-aged woman named Carol Chen, who'd clearly handled thousands of these cases, but even she raised her eyebrows at the family connection. "Your own twin sister and your mother," Carol said, shaking her head. "I've seen family fraud before. It's actually more common than people think, but this is particularly elaborate." "What are my chances of full recovery?" Sarah asked. "Good, actually, because you caught it relatively quickly, and you have documentation. The credit card companies and banks will reverse the fraudulent charges once you provide police reports and identity theft affidavits. Your credit score will take a hit initially, but it will recover." Carol handed her a thick packet of forms. "This is your recovery plan. You'll need to contact each credit bureau, freeze your credit, dispute every fraudulent account, and get written confirmation from each institution." The process took hours. Phone calls to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion to place fraud alerts and credit freezes. Calls to her credit card companies to cancel cards and dispute charges. A police report at the NYPD's Financial Crimes Unit. By the time Sarah returned to her hotel room that evening, she'd made 23 phone calls and filled out 16 different forms. Her phone rang. Mom calling. Sarah stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Rachel told me what happened at the company," Patricia said, her voice tight with accusation. "You really went through with it. You're destroying your sister's life. She destroyed her own life, Mom, and tried to destroy mine in the process. She made a mistake. She's young. She was desperate. She's 29 years old." Sarah interrupted. "She's not a child. And you helped her plan this. You encouraged her. You told her it would work." The silence on the other end was damning. "I thought you'd understand eventually," Patricia said finally. "I thought once you calmed down, you'd see that family is more important than a job. You could have gotten another position." Rachel needed this one. "No, Mom. What Rachel needed was to build her own career, on her own merits. What she needed was a mother who believed in her enough to help her legitimately, not one who taught her that stealing and fraud were acceptable shortcuts. So you're choosing your career over your family." Sarah closed her eyes. The gaslighting was so familiar, so well practiced. "I'm choosing consequences over enabling. There's a difference. Rachel committed multiple felonies. She didn't just steal my job. She stole my financial identity, opened fraudulent accounts, Charge thousands of dollars I'll have to fight to get refunded, and you helped her do it. Are you going to press charges against me too? Patricia's voice dripped with bitterness. That depends on whether you cooperate with the investigation. The police will want to know how you helped Rachel prepare, what you knew, when you knew it. If you're honest, you might avoid criminal charges. If you lie or obstruct, you sound like a stranger, Patricia said. I don't even recognize my own daughter. Funny, Sarah said quietly. I was thinking the same thing about my mother. She hung up before Patricia could respond and sat on the hotel bed, staring at the New York skyline through her window. The city glittered with possibility, with the life she'd worked so hard to build. But it all felt tainted now, overshadowed by the knowledge that the people who were supposed to celebrate her success had tried to steal it instead. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Gonzalez. Chicago PD coordinating with NYPD on your case. Your building's security footage confirms you were in Chicago during the time in question. Between that and the confession, we have a strong case. Rachel will likely face federal charges. Do you want to pursue charges against your mother? Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Sending her own mother to prison felt impossible, monstrous, but so did letting her escape consequences for orchestrating fraud against her own daughter. She typed back, "Let me think about it. I need to talk to my lawyer first." Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "Sarah, it's Rachel. They're arresting me tomorrow morning. Federal agents. Mom is hysterical. Please, is there any way to stop this? I'll do anything. I'll make it right. I'm begging you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't cry. She'd done enough crying. Instead, she typed a single response. "You should have thought about consequences before you committed fraud. Hire a good lawyer, Rachel. You're going to need one." Then she blocked the number. The next morning, Sarah returned to the FTC office to complete more paperwork. On her way out, she stopped at a coffee shop and ordered a latte. As she waited, she caught sight of her reflection in the shop's mirror. Auburn hair, green eyes, professional blazer. She looked like herself, but she also looked like Rachel. They would always be identical, always be mirrors of each other. The difference was, Sarah had built her identity through years of hard work, integrity, and determination. Rachel had tried to steal a shortcut, and their mother had chosen which daughter's success mattered more. Sarah picked up her coffee and walked out into the Manhattan morning, ready to rebuild what had been stolen and reclaim the life that had always been rightfully hers. Sarah stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office at Sterling & Associates, watching the February snow-dust Manhattan skyline. 2 months had passed since she'd officially started, and she'd thrown herself into her work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The Brennan Technologies campaign expansion, a complete rebrand for a boutique hotel chain, a social media strategy for a tech startup that had already increased their engagement by 43%. Her desk was covered with industry awards nominations. David Sterling had praised her work in the last all-hands meeting. Her team respected her. This was everything she'd worked for, everything Rachel had tried to steal. Yet Sarah couldn't shake the hollow feeling that followed her home each night to her Brooklyn apartment. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is Linda Hartwell, your mom's best friend from Naperville. I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet? I'm in New York this week for work." Sarah stared at the message. Linda Hartwell. She remembered her from childhood. A warm woman with kind eyes who'd been at every birthday party, every school event. She hadn't spoken to Linda in years. She typed back, "Coffee tomorrow? There's a cafe near my office in Midtown." The response came immediately. "Thank you. 10 a.m.? This is about your mother and Rachel. Things you need to know." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the cafe early, ordering a latte and claiming a corner table. When Linda walked in, Sarah was struck by how much older she looked. Gray hair, deeper lines around her eyes, but her expression held the same warmth Sarah remembered. "Sarah," Linda embraced her. "Look at you. So successful, so accomplished. I've been following your career online." They sat, and Linda's expression grew serious. "I should have reached out sooner. Years sooner, actually. But I didn't want to interfere in family matters. Now, after what happened with Rachel and your job, Patricia told me about it, her version anyway, I realized I can't stay silent anymore." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked carefully. Linda pulled out her phone, scrolling through old photos. She stopped on one from what looked like a childhood birthday party. 2 identical girls, maybe 7 years old, blowing out candles. Sarah and Rachel, their faces mirror images of joy. "Do you remember this party?" Linda asked. "My 7th birthday. Mom made that elaborate princess cake. Your mother made 2 cakes that year," Linda said quietly. "One for your party and one for Rachel's party, which was 2 weeks later. Do you remember Rachel's party?" Sarah frowned, searching her memory. No, actually, I don't. That's because there wasn't one. Patricia canceled it at the last minute. She said Rachel had been misbehaving, that she didn't deserve a party. Rachel was devastated. She'd invited friends from school, planned games, but Patricia said she had to learn consequences. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "I didn't know that. You wouldn't have. Patricia was very careful about how she managed you girls. Sarah, I've watched your mother for 30 years, and I've seen a pattern that I think you need to understand." Linda leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Patricia has always treated you and Rachel differently. You were her golden child, the successful one, the accomplished one. Everything you did was celebrated. Rachel was her scapegoat, blamed for everything, compared unfavorably to you constantly, told she'd never measure up." Sarah's throat tightened. "But Mom always said she loved us equally. Love and treatment are different things." "Sarah, do you remember when you both applied to college? You got into Northwestern, your first choice. Rachel got into DePaul, which was a good school, but Patricia spent weeks talking about how you'd gotten into the better university, how proud she was of you, how Rachel needed to try harder to be more like you." The memories started flooding back. Comparisons at the dinner table. "Why can't you keep your room clean like Sarah? Sarah got an A in chemistry. What happened with your B+? Sarah has a boyfriend, Rachel. When are you going to meet someone nice?" "I thought that was just normal parent stuff," Sarah whispered, "encouraging us to do better." "It wasn't encouragement. It was systematic comparison designed to keep you elevated and Rachel diminished." Linda showed her more photos on her phone. Family events where Sarah stood next to Patricia, beaming, while Rachel stood slightly apart, her smile forced. "Your mother created competition between you from the beginning. She made everything a comparison, everything a contest. And she always made sure you won, and Rachel lost." Sarah felt sick. "But then why would Mom help Rachel steal my identity? If I was the golden child?" "Because narcissistic parents don't actually want either child to succeed independently," Linda said. "They want control. When you got that job in New York, you were moving away, becoming your own person outside of Patricia's influence. Rachel was already dependent on her, already broken down by years of being told she was the failure. I think Patricia saw an opportunity to keep you both under her control. Rachel by making her complicit in fraud. You by forcing you to stay connected to family drama instead of thriving in your new life. That's insane. It's narcissistic family dynamics. The golden child and the scapegoat aren't actually about loving one and hating the other. They're both just tools for the narcissistic parent to maintain control and feel important." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, I watched Patricia damage both of you for years. She pitted you against each other. Every accomplishment you had was used as a weapon against Rachel. Every failure Rachel had was used to elevate you. Neither of you had a chance to just be sisters." Sarah sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. She thought about all the times she'd felt guilty about her success, wondering why Rachel couldn't seem to get her life together. She thought about how their mother had always framed it as Sarah being naturally superior, Rachel being naturally inferior. "Rachel was set up to fail," Sarah said slowly. "Mom made sure she'd never feel good enough." "Yes, and when Rachel did that horrible thing to you, stealing your identity, committing fraud, I'm not excusing it. What she did was wrong, criminal even. But I want you to understand the environment that created that desperation. Your mother spent 29 years telling Rachel she was worthless, that she'd never be as good as you. Is it any wonder that when given the opportunity to literally become you, Rachel took it?" Sarah's hands shook around her coffee cup. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Rachel's trial starts in 3 weeks. Because I know you're struggling with whether to testify, whether to push for the maximum sentence. And because I think you need to understand that you and Rachel were both victims of your mother's manipulation. Rachel hurt you terribly, but Patricia hurt both of you for your entire lives." That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment with Linda's words echoing in her mind. She opened her laptop and started researching narcissistic family dynamics, golden child and scapegoat roles, sibling rivalry manufactured by parental manipulation. Every article she read felt like it was describing her family. The favoritism, the constant comparisons, The way love and approval were used as rewards and punishments. The pitting of siblings against each other to maintain parental control. She called her therapist, the one she'd started seeing after the identity theft, and scheduled an emergency session. 2 days later, sitting in Dr. Elena Morrison's office, Sarah worked through the revelations. "I spent my whole life thinking I was the lucky one," Sarah said. "I was the successful daughter, the one Mom was proud of, but now I'm realizing I was just playing a role she assigned me, and every time I succeeded, I was unknowingly helping her abuse Rachel." "You were a child," Dr. Morrison said gently. "Children don't create family dynamics. Parents do. Your mother's behavior toward both of you was her choice, not yours, but I benefited from it. I got the praise, the support, the confidence. Rachel got criticism and comparison and shame, and now Rachel faces federal charges for identity theft and fraud," Dr. Morrison said. "The sentencing guidelines suggest anywhere from 18 months to 5 years in prison, plus restitution. How are you feeling about that?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Conflicted. What she did to me was devastating. The fraud, the financial theft, the violation of trust. It was all real. But I'm also realizing that the person who hurt us both the most is walking free. Your mother, yes. Sarah looked out the window at the gray February sky. Mom created this dynamic. She made Rachel desperate enough to commit crimes. She helped plan the fraud. She chose Rachel's temporary validation over my entire career, and she's facing no consequences. What do you want to do about that? Sarah didn't answer immediately. The question was enormous, complicated, loaded with decades of family history and manipulation. Finally, she said, "I want to tell the truth, all of it, at Rachel's trial. I want the judge to understand the full context, what Rachel did, why she did it, and who else is responsible." The weeks leading up to Rachel's trial were tense. Sarah received daily calls from her mother, guilt trips, accusations, pleas to drop the charges or at least minimize her testimony. Sarah stopped answering. She also received letters from Rachel, apologizing, explaining, begging for understanding. Those, Sarah read carefully. One letter in particular stuck with her. "Sarah, Linda Hartwell came to visit me. She told me about the things she told you. I've been in therapy here, and my lawyer got me working with a psychologist who specializes in family trauma. I'm starting to understand how Mom manipulated both of us. I'm not saying that excuses what I did to you. It doesn't. But I spent my whole life being told I was the failure twin, the disappointing daughter, the one who could never measure up. When Mom suggested I could become you, could have your success, your confidence, your life, I didn't see it as stealing. I saw it as finally being enough. I was so wrong. I hurt you terribly. I destroyed your trust. I committed crimes, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. But Sarah, I need you to know, I never hated you. I hated myself, and Mom made sure I would." Sarah folded the letter carefully and added it to the file her lawyer was preparing for the trial. On the first day of proceedings, Sarah arrived at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. The building was imposing, all marble and authority. Rachel was already there with her defense attorney, looking small and frightened in a conservative gray suit. When their eyes met across the courtroom, Sarah saw her own face staring back at her. Identical features, but completely different lives. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. Identity theft, financial fraud, unauthorized use of credit cards, false impersonation to obtain employment. The evidence was overwhelming. Confessions, security footage, financial records. Rachel's attorney didn't dispute the facts. Instead, he argued for leniency, presenting psychiatric evaluations that detailed Rachel's history of depression, low self-esteem, and family dysfunction. When it was Sarah's turn to testify, she took the stand and told her story. The job she'd worked years to earn, the discovery that someone was impersonating her, the financial devastation, the betrayal. But she also told the other story, the one Linda had helped her see, the lifetime of comparisons, the golden child and scapegoat dynamic, the mother who'd orchestrated the fraud. "I'm not asking the court to excuse what my sister did," Sarah said clearly. "She committed serious crimes against me. But I want the court to understand that there's someone else who bears responsibility for creating the environment where this became possible. My mother, Patricia Mitchell, spent our entire lives pitting my sister and me against each other. She helped plan this fraud. She encouraged Rachel to impersonate me, and she's never expressed remorse or taken accountability. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judith Reeves, listened intently. When the prosecution asked if Sarah wanted to make a sentencing recommendation, she paused. "I want justice," Sarah said, "but I also want healing. I want my sister to get the mental health treatment she needs. I want her to understand the full impact of her actions. And I want my mother to be held accountable too." The trial lasted 3 days. At the end, Judge Reeves delivered her verdict and sentence with careful consideration. "Ms. Rachel Mitchell, you've been found guilty of identity theft, fraud, and related charges. These are serious crimes that cause significant harm to your sister. However, the court also recognizes the extraordinary circumstances, the lifelong pattern of emotional abuse and manipulation that contributed to your actions. This does not excuse your crimes, but it provides important context." Judge Reeves sentenced Rachel to 2 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release with mandatory mental health treatment and restitution to Sarah for all financial damages. It was toward the lower end of the sentencing guidelines. Then the judge turned to the prosecution. "I'm also ordering that the case against Patricia Mitchell be pursued. Based on testimony and evidence presented, there's probable cause to charge her with conspiracy to commit fraud, aiding and abetting identity theft, and obstruction. This court will not allow a person who orchestrated crimes against her own daughter to escape consequences." Sarah felt tears stream down her face, not of sadness, but of relief. Someone had finally seen the full truth. Someone had finally held everyone accountable. As they left the courthouse, Rachel was taken into custody. Before she was led away, she looked at Sarah one last time. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. Sarah nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. They were both survivors of the same damage, just in different ways. August arrived with oppressive heat that made the New York streets shimmer like mirages. Sarah stood in her air-conditioned office, reviewing a presentation for a major client pitch, when her phone rang. The federal prosecutor's office. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney Caroline Brenner. Your mother's trial is scheduled for September 15th. We need to discuss your testimony." Sarah closed her office door. "What do you need from me?" "Everything. The pattern of favoritism and manipulation. How she planned the identity theft with Rachel. Her continued interference after the fraud was discovered. You're our key witness, Sarah. Without your testimony, we have a much weaker case. And if I testify, your mother faces up to 10 years for conspiracy to commit fraud, aiding and abetting identity theft, and obstruction of justice. The evidence is strong, but your first-hand account of her behavior, the lifetime of manipulation, the planning conversations, that's what will convince a jury." After the call ended, Sarah sat motionless. Testifying against Rachel had been difficult. Testifying against her mother felt impossible, even after everything Patricia had done. That evening, a letter arrived from Rachel. Sarah had been receiving them monthly, updates from the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, where Rachel was serving her sentence. This letter was different. "Sarah, I've been in therapy here for 6 months now. Dr. Peterson specializes in family trauma and narcissistic abuse dynamics. We've been working through our childhood, and I'm starting to see how Mom manipulated both of us in ways I never understood. The golden child and scapegoat roles, the constant comparisons, the way she used your success as a weapon against me and my failures as proof of your superiority. I'm not writing to make excuses. What I did to you was criminal and cruel, but I'm learning that Mom spent our entire lives ensuring I'd feel worthless, and you'd feel obligated to carry the family's pride. Neither of us had a chance to just be ourselves, to be sisters without her interference. Mom's trial is coming up. Her lawyer contacted me, asking if I'd testify on her behalf, character witness, talk about what a loving mother she's been. I told him no. Sarah, I can't lie anymore. I can't protect her. She orchestrated my crime against you. She convinced me it was justified, that you owed me this. That family meant sacrificing for each other. She never once considered what she was asking me to do to you. I know you're struggling with whether to testify. Dr. Peterson says that confronting our abuser is part of healing, but it has to be your choice. I'm writing to tell you that whatever you decide, I support you. If you testify, you'll be telling the truth, something neither of us was allowed to do growing up. If you choose not to, I understand that too. Testifying against a parent, even one who hurt us, is one of the hardest things anyone can do. There's something else I want to propose. Dr. Peterson thinks it might help both of us to do a family therapy session together, not with Mom, but just us. to talk through everything that happened, to understand how we were both damaged, to see if there's any possibility of rebuilding a relationship as adults free from Mom's manipulation. You don't owe me this. I hurt you terribly, but if you're willing, I'd like to try. Your sister, I hope I still get to call myself that. Rachel Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She called Dr. Morrison and scheduled an emergency session. A joint therapy session with Rachel, Dr. Morrison said thoughtfully. How does that idea make you feel? Terrified, angry, but also curious. I've spent months understanding how Mom damaged both of us. Rachel was the weapon Mom used against me, but she was also a victim. Can I heal from what Rachel did without understanding why she did it? Reconciliation is possible, but it requires something specific from both parties, Dr. Morrison explained. It's not about rehashing who did what, or demanding specific apologies. It's about each person taking responsibility for their own actions and growth, demonstrating genuine change, and establishing new boundaries. And my mother's trial? Dr. Morrison leaned forward. Sarah, you need to separate these 2 issues. Your relationship with Rachel is one thing. Holding your mother accountable is another. You can choose to explore healing with Rachel while also testifying truthfully about your mother's actions. These aren't contradictory choices. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah wrestled with her decision. She researched what testifying against a parent in federal court would entail. She reviewed all the evidence, text messages where Patricia had discussed the plan with Rachel, conversations where she'd tried to convince Sarah to let the fraud go, witness statements from Linda Hartwell about years of manipulative behavior. She also reached out to the prison to arrange a therapy session with Rachel. The process required approval from Rachel's treatment team, security clearance, and coordination with Dr. Peterson. It would happen in 3 weeks. On September 1st, Sarah met with Caroline Brenner at the U.S. Attorney's Office to prepare her testimony. This won't be easy, Caroline warned. Defense attorneys in cases like this often try to portray the testifying family member as vindictive or attention-seeking. They'll argue that you're exaggerating your mother's role because you're angry about what Rachel did. You need to be prepared for that. I'm ready, Sarah said. I've spent months in therapy understanding what happened. I've documented everything, and I've realized something important. Staying silent to protect her would mean continuing the cycle of dysfunction. Mom has never faced real consequences for her behavior. Maybe if she does, she'll finally understand the damage she caused. On September 10th, 5 days before the trial, Sarah drove to the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury. The facility was less imposing than she'd imagined. Low buildings surrounded by fencing, more campus-like than the Gothic prisons of movies. Security processed her thoroughly before escorting her to a private room in the mental health wing. Rachel entered wearing prison khakis, her auburn hair shorter than Sarah remembered. They were still identical, but something in Rachel's bearing had changed. She looked older, more grounded, less like she was trying to disappear into herself. Ida Peterson, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, sat between them. Thank you both for being willing to do this. Sarah, I've been working with Rachel for 6 months on understanding the family dynamics that contributed to her criminal behavior. Rachel, Sarah has been in her own therapy processing the trauma of identity theft and lifelong manipulation. Today isn't about determining who was more hurt or more wrong. It's about both of you taking responsibility for your own paths forward. The session lasted 2 hours. Rachel spoke about growing up in Sarah's shadow, about internalizing the message that she was fundamentally inferior, about how that shaped every choice she made. She took full responsibility for the fraud, but she also explained the desperation that had made her mother's plan seem like a solution rather than a crime. Sarah talked about the guilt she'd carried without understanding it, the sense that her success somehow came at Rachel's expense. She talked about the betrayal of the identity theft, but also about the revelation that they'd both been tools in their mother's narcissistic game. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Rachel said, her voice steady. I don't know if you can or should, but I want you to know that I'm not the same person who stole your identity. I'm working every day to understand why I made those choices and to become someone who would never do that again. I don't forgive you yet, Sarah said honestly. The damage was too deep, but I'm starting to understand that we were both casualties of Mom's manipulation, and I'm willing to see if, eventually, we can have some kind of relationship. Not the twin bond we should have had. That's gone. But maybe something new, built on honesty, instead of competition. Dr. Peterson nodded approvingly. That's realistic and healthy. Reconciliation, if it happens, will take years. But you've both taken the first step, acknowledging the truth without minimizing either person's pain or responsibility. As Sarah prepared to leave, Rachel reached out hesitantly. The trial. Are you going to testify? Yes, Sarah said. I'm going to tell the truth about everything Mom did. To both of us. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Good. She needs to finally face what she's done. September 15th arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. Sarah wore a navy suit and carried a folder containing years of documentation. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan was packed. Apparently, trials of mothers accused of orchestrating fraud against their own daughters attracted media attention. Patricia sat at the defense table looking smaller than Sarah remembered. Her auburn hair, the same shade as her daughter's, was now streaked with gray. When their eyes met, Patricia's expression was wounded, betrayed. Sarah looked away. The prosecution built their case methodically, phone records showing hundreds of calls between Patricia and Rachel in the weeks before the identity theft, text messages discussing Sarah's job offer and how Rachel could use it as an opportunity, testimony from Linda Hartwell about Patricia's lifetime pattern of manipulation, financial records showing Patricia had helped Rachel open the fraudulent credit cards. When Sarah took the stand, the courtroom went silent. Caroline Brenner led her through the testimony gently but thoroughly. Ms. Mitchell, can you describe the dynamic between you, your sister, and your mother growing up? Sarah took a breath. My mother divided us from the beginning. I was the golden child, praised for everything, held up as the example. Rachel was the scapegoat, criticized constantly, compared unfavorably to me, told she was the disappointing daughter. I didn't understand this at the time. I thought it was normal, or that I really was just better than Rachel at everything. When did you begin to understand differently? After Rachel stole my identity, a family friend helped me see the pattern, the systematic manipulation, the way Mom used my success as a weapon against Rachel and Rachel's struggles as proof of my superiority. Neither of us was allowed to just be ourselves. We were both playing roles Mom assigned us. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it true that you're testifying against your mother because you're angry at your sister? I'm testifying because my mother committed crimes, Sarah said calmly. She planned the fraud. She encouraged Rachel to impersonate me. She tried to convince me to let it go rather than report it. That's conspiracy, and obstruction, and aiding and abetting. My anger doesn't change the facts. Your mother raised you, provided for you, helped you become successful. My mother manipulated both her daughters for her own psychological needs, Sarah interrupted. She created a toxic dynamic that damaged both of us. One daughter feeling worthless, one daughter feeling guilty. That's not love, that's abuse. And when Rachel committed crimes because of that lifetime of damage, Mom helped, rather than stopping her. The defense attorney tried several more approaches, but Sarah remained steady. She'd spent months in therapy preparing for this. She knew her truth, and she knew the evidence. Patricia took the stand in her own defense, tearful and wounded. She claimed she'd only been trying to help Rachel, that she'd thought borrowing Sarah's credentials was harmless, that she'd had no idea it would escalate to credit card fraud. She painted herself as a loving mother, caught between two daughters. But the prosecution's rebuttal was devastating. Text messages where Patricia explicitly discussed opening credit cards in Sarah's name. Phone calls where she'd coached Rachel on how to answer questions about Sarah's work history. Testimony from Rachel herself, delivered via video from prison, detailing her mother's role in planning every aspect of the fraud. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, Patricia sobbed. Sarah felt no triumph, only exhaustion and sadness. At sentencing 3 weeks later, the judge, the same Judge Reeves who'd sentenced Rachel, was unsparing. Ms. Patricia Mitchell, you violated one of the most fundamental duties a parent has, to love and protect your children without condition. Instead, you manipulated both daughters, creating a dynamic that damaged them both. You orchestrated serious crimes against one daughter with the help of the other. The court finds your behavior particularly egregious because of the parental relationship and the lifetime pattern of abuse. Judge Reeves sentenced Patricia to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release with mandatory mental health treatment. She was also ordered to pay restitution to Sarah for all legal fees and therapy costs. As Patricia was led away, she looked at Sarah one last time. "How could you do this to your own mother?" she called out. Sarah stood and looked her mother in the eyes. I told the truth. That's something you never taught us to do. 2 years had passed since the trials. Sarah stood at the window of her corner office at Sterling and Associates, now vice president of marketing, watching the March rain wash over Manhattan. At 31, she'd built a life she once only dreamed of, a thriving career, genuine friendships, a serious relationship with Marcus, a software engineer she'd met at an industry conference. Most importantly, she'd built a life free from the toxic dynamics that had defined her first 3 decades. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the prison monitoring system. Rachel's release date, April 2nd, 10 days away. They'd maintained contact over the 2 years, monthly video calls, letters, occasional visits. The conversations had evolved from painful processing of the past to tentative planning for the future. Rachel had completed her GED in prison, taken business courses, and worked extensively with Dr. Peterson on understanding the family dynamics that had shaped her choices. She'd also paid back every dollar of the $30,000 she'd stolen, working prison jobs and selling crafts she made in therapy. But release was different than rehabilitation. Sarah knew the statistics. Finding employment with a felony record was brutal. Housing discrimination was rampant. The structural barriers to successful re-entry were enormous. Her phone rang. Rachel, from the prison. Sarah. Her sister's voice was nervous but steady. I wanted to talk to you before I get out. My caseworker says I need a solid re-entry plan. Employment prospects, stable housing, ongoing therapy. I've applied to 37 jobs in the Chicago area. No responses. I was thinking maybe I could find something in New York instead, but I wanted to check with you first. I don't want to invade your space or make you uncomfortable. Sarah had been preparing for this conversation for months, working with Dr. Morrison on healthy boundaries and realistic expectations. I have a proposal, she said carefully, but I need you to hear me out completely before responding. Okay. I've been talking to David Sterling about a position at one of our subsidiary companies, a small boutique marketing firm we acquired last year that handles local Chicago businesses. They need an administrative coordinator. It's entry-level, and it requires full disclosure of your criminal record to HR. But David is willing to give you an interview based on my recommendation and your work in prison. No promises, but a genuine opportunity. Rachel was silent for a long moment. Sarah, I don't know what to say. After everything I did to you. This isn't charity, and it's not forgiveness, Sarah interrupted. It's me recognizing that you've done real work to change, and that the criminal justice system sets people up to fail after release. I'm giving you a chance to prove you're serious about rebuilding your life legitimately. But Rachel, if you mess this up, if you lie or steal or cut corners, we're done. Not just as employer and employee, as sisters. This is your one chance with me. I understand. And Sarah, thank you. I won't waste this. There's more. I've arranged for you to continue therapy with a colleague of Dr. Morrison's in Chicago, twice a week for the first year, mandatory. I'm also connecting you with a halfway house that specializes in white-collar crime re-entry. They have good success rates with employment and housing placement. After the call ended, Marcus found Sarah staring out the window again. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. That was brave, he said quietly. Or stupid. My therapist can't decide which. It's both, but it's also the right thing to do. Marcus had heard the full story early in their relationship. Sarah had learned that honesty about her family trauma was essential for any healthy relationship. How are you feeling about your mom's release? Patricia was scheduled to be released in June, 2 months after Rachel. That was the conversation Sarah had been avoiding. I don't know yet, she admitted. With Rachel, I can see the change. She's done the work, taken responsibility, demonstrated genuine remorse. Mom, she spent the entire 5 years blaming me and Rachel for her incarceration. Her letters are all about how we betrayed her, how ungrateful we are, how we destroyed the family. Have you decided if you'll have any contact with her? No. Dr. Morrison says I don't owe her anything. Not visits, not phone calls, not reconciliation. The only person who can decide the terms of contact is me. On April 2nd, Sarah flew to Chicago to be there when Rachel was released. She watched from the parking lot as her sister walked out of the correctional facility in donated civilian clothes, carrying a small bag of belongings. Rachel looked around uncertainly until she spotted Sarah's car. The drive to the halfway house was quiet. Rachel stared out the window at the world she hadn't seen freely in 2 years. Everything looks different, she said softly. Or maybe I'm different, and that changes how I see everything. At the halfway house, they met with Rachel's re-entry coordinator, a woman named Denise Crawford, who'd helped hundreds of formerly incarcerated people rebuild their lives. "The first month is the hardest," Denise said bluntly. "You'll be adjusting to freedom, dealing with probation requirements, navigating the stigma of a criminal record. Your sister has set you up better than most. You have housing here, a job interview next week, and therapy arranged. But Rachel, you need to understand. Approximately 68% of people released from prison are rearrested within 3 years. The system is designed to make success difficult. I'm going to be in the 32%, Rachel said firmly. Over the next month, Sarah watched Rachel navigate re-entry with determination. The job interview went well. Rachel was honest about her criminal history, her rehabilitation, and her commitment to legitimate work. She got the position. Her first paycheck made her cry. They established new boundaries for their relationship. Weekly video calls to check in, monthly in-person visits when Sarah traveled to Chicago for work, honesty about struggles and setbacks, and a shared commitment to breaking the cycle of dysfunction that had defined their family. In May, a month before Patricia's release, both sisters received letters from their mother. Sarah read hers in her therapist's office, with Dr. Morrison ready to process her reaction. "Sarah, I'll be released in 4 weeks. I expect you and Rachel to be there to pick me up, take me home to Naperville, and help me rebuild my life. You both owe me that after destroying my reputation and putting me in prison. I'm your mother. I raised you, sacrificed for you, and you repaid me with betrayal. I've spoken with a lawyer about suing you for defamation and emotional distress. If you want to avoid that, you'll make things right. Help me find employment. Support me financially until I'm back on my feet. Apologize publicly for the lies you told about me in court. You destroyed our family, Sarah. The least you can do is help put it back together." Mom, Dr. Morrison watched Sarah's face carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Nothing," Sarah said, surprised by her own calm. "I feel nothing. No guilt, no obligation, no anger, just nothing." She still doesn't get it. After 5 years in prison, therapy, everything, she still thinks she's the victim. "That's actually healthy," Dr. Morrison said. "You've processed the guilt and obligation she installed in you. You've recognized that her view of events is distorted by her own narcissism. Feeling nothing is sometimes the healthiest response to someone who refuses to take accountability." Rachel's letter from Patricia was similar. Demands, blame, threats. When the sisters talked on their weekly call, they made a decision together. "We're not picking her up," Sarah said. "We're not supporting her financially. We're not apologizing for telling the truth. She's going to try to manipulate us," Rachel warned. "She'll call everyone we know, tell them we've abandoned her, make us look like terrible daughters. Let her. Anyone who knows the full story will understand. Anyone who doesn't isn't someone we need in our lives." When Patricia was released in June, she called both daughters repeatedly. Sarah and Rachel had blocked her on their phones, email, and social media. Patricia tried reaching out through relatives, through old family friends, through anyone who might feel sorry for her. Most people, once they heard the full story, declined to help her manipulate her daughters. Linda Hartwell called Sarah in July. "Your mother showed up at my house yesterday, demanding I help her contact you. I told her no. She's telling everyone that you and Rachel are vindictive, cruel, that you've abandoned your elderly mother. I'm sorry she dragged you into this, Linda. Don't be. I'm proud of you both. Breaking free from a narcissistic parent is one of the hardest things anyone can do. You're doing it with grace and strength." In September, 6 months after Rachel's release, the sisters met in Chicago for dinner. It was the first time they'd socialized rather than just checking in about re-entry logistics. They chose a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park, sitting across from each other at a corner table. "I got a promotion," Rachel said, smiling genuinely for the first time Sarah could remember. "Junior marketing associate. They created the position for me because my work has been good. David Sterling called my boss personally to recommend me." "That's amazing, Rachel. You earned that." "I also started dating someone. His name is James. He knows about my criminal record. I told him on the first date. He's a teacher, works with at-risk kids. He says my past makes me more interesting, not less." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "You're building a real life, a clean life, because you gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one." Rachel reached across the table, hesitating. Sarah took her hand. "I know I can never fully make up for what I did to you, but Sarah, I'm spending every day trying to be someone worthy of your help." "You're not doing it for me," Sarah said gently. "You're doing it for yourself. That's the only way it works." They talked about their mother, about the constant attempts at contact, The manipulation campaigns, the refusal to accept responsibility. Do you think she'll ever change? Rachel asked. No, Sarah said honestly. People like Mom don't change unless they want to, and she doesn't want to. She genuinely believes she did nothing wrong, that we're the villains in her story. We have to accept that and move forward without her. That's sad. It is, but it's also freedom. For the first time in our lives, we're not playing the roles she assigned us. You're not the scapegoat. I'm not the golden child. We're just two women trying to build healthy lives and maybe, eventually, a healthy relationship with each other. In November, Sarah and Marcus got engaged. The proposal was simple, romantic, free of drama. When Sarah called Rachel to tell her, there was genuine joy in her sister's voice. Will I be invited to the wedding? Rachel asked hesitantly. Yes, not as my maid of honor. That's going to Emma, my friend from work, but as my sister, because that's what you're becoming again. Not the sister we were as kids under Mom's control, but the sister you're choosing to be now. As the year drew to a close, Sarah reflected on the journey. The identity theft that had devastated her life had also, paradoxically, freed her. It had forced her to see the toxic dynamics she'd been part of without understanding them. It had given both sisters the opportunity to break free from their mother's manipulation and build something authentic. Dr. Morrison called it post-traumatic growth, the way some people don't just survive trauma, but use it as a catalyst for profound positive change. You took the worst thing that happened to you and transformed it into an opportunity for healing, Dr. Morrison said. That's extraordinary. It didn't feel extraordinary, Sarah admitted. It felt like survival. That's what makes it extraordinary. You survived something that could have destroyed you, and you came out stronger, healthier, and more authentic. In December, 3 years after the identity theft, Sarah stood in her Brooklyn apartment decorating for Christmas with Marcus. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Sarah, it's me. Patricia's voice, older and harder than Sarah remembered. I just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. Can we talk? Sarah looked at Marcus, who squeezed her hand supportively. She took a breath. Mom, I'll talk to you, but only on my terms. If you want any relationship with me, with us, you need to do 3 things. First, get therapy with a specialist in narcissistic personality disorders and family trauma. Second, take genuine responsibility for your actions without blaming me or Rachel. Third, respect our boundaries without manipulation or guilt. So you're giving me conditions to be in my own daughter's lives? Yes, those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Patricia was silent for a long moment. I'll think about it. You do that. When you're ready to meet those conditions, you can contact me again. Until then, I'm going to live my life, the one I built without your manipulation. Sarah hung up and turned to Marcus. How did I do? You were perfect, firm, clear, and you didn't let her manipulate you. She won't do it, Sarah said quietly. She won't get the therapy or take responsibility, but at least I gave her the chance. Now I can move forward knowing I did what I could. That Christmas, Sarah and Rachel had dinner together in Chicago, just the 2 of them. No mother, no drama, no assigned roles. They talked about Rachel's promotion, Sarah's engagement plans, their shared memories of childhood before they understood what was happening to them. They laughed, they cried, and they made a promise to each other. If either of us ever has children, Sarah said, we break this cycle completely. No golden child, no scapegoat, no comparisons, no manipulation. We teach them that they're loved for who they are, not what they achieve. I promise, Rachel said. We break the cycle. As Sarah flew back to New York that night, watching the city lights disappear beneath the clouds, she thought about identity, not the stolen version, but the authentic one she'd built. She was Sarah Mitchell, vice president of marketing, fiancée to Marcus, sister to Rachel in their new, healthier dynamic, survivor of identity theft, family betrayal, and narcissistic abuse, and most importantly, the architect of her own life, free from the roles and expectations that had defined her first 30 years. The woman who'd had her identity stolen had discovered something more valuable in the process, her genuine self, and that was something no one could ever take from her again. Patricia never called back. She never got the therapy, never took responsibility, never respected boundaries. The last Sarah heard, their mother was living in a small apartment in Naperville, still telling everyone who'd listened that her daughters had betrayed her. Some people believed her, most didn't. 6 months later, Sarah and Marcus married in a small ceremony in Central Park. Rachel attended with James, wearing a simple lavender dress and a genuine smile. No one mentioned the absent mother. They'd all moved forward, building lives defined by authenticity, accountability, and the courage to break generational cycles of dysfunction. As Sarah stood with Marcus, exchanging vows in front of people she'd chosen, not people assigned by birth or obligation, she realized that sometimes the greatest gift comes from the worst betrayal. Her sister had stolen her identity, her mother had betrayed her trust, and from those ashes, she'd built a life more authentic and fulfilling than she'd ever imagined possible. The story of Sarah and Rachel Mitchell wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier, more complicated, more real. It was a story about two women who'd been manipulated their entire lives, who'd hurt each other deeply, and who'd chosen, despite everything, to do the hard work of healing. Not for their mother, not for society's expectations, but for themselves. And in the end, that made all the difference.